When it comes to innovation and shaping the future, you don't need all the answers, but you do need space to think differently. We're launching a special 6-part Brave Human Leadership series in collaboration with our strategic partner, the Human Leadership Institute. In this series, we explore what it really takes to lead through change, a challenge more and more leaders are facing every day. At TomorrowZone, we help leaders shaping the future of business and technology to pause, reframe, and reimagine how they move forward so that they can lead with clarity, empathy, and purpose. Are you ready to think differently? Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we explore the future of leadership, innovation, and transformation. I'm your host, Reuben, and in this special 6-episode series, we're diving into what it really takes to lead in this rapidly changing world. And we're not just talking about leadership buzzwords. We're talking about brave human leadership. This is a research-backed framework built on belonging, resilience, authenticity, vulnerability, and empathy. These are the human-centered leadership skills that drive real impact, foster innovation, and create cultures where people and businesses can truly thrive. Joining me throughout the series is Jen Croneberger, founder and chief inspiration officer of the Human Leadership Institute, and a leading expert in relational leadership. Together, we're exploring the science, the strategies, and the stories behind brave leadership and why it's more essential now than ever. So, to finish out our series, we're going to discuss the E in BRAVE, and E stands for empathy. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Deb. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe we're on the last episode already.
This has been fun.
It really has. Yeah, it's kind of fun just to see, how much brave human leadership really does fit into the way that we need to show up if we truly want to innovate and make awesome happen. It's so fitting. So, well, let's dive into empathy. And first of all, let's just start with a definition. Empathy is one of those words people throw around all the time. Oh, yeah. So how do you define true leadership empathy?
So I think empathy isn't just feeling for someone, it's feeling with someone. And it's kind of the opportunity or ability to step into someone else's experience, to understand their emotions, and to most importantly, hold space for their reality without judgment. And those two words at the end are key. Without judgment, right? Empathy is not sympathy, right? I always joke that I want to write to Hallmark and tell them that they shouldn't be sympathy cards, they should be empathy cards. So nobody really wants your sympathy. Sympathy is, hey, so sorry that happened. How can we fix it? Or, hey, let me know what I can do. And we think we're doing a service to people by saying that. But the truth is, real empathy is the ability to kind of pause and to just sit in it with someone for as long as it takes. And the difference there is we are human fixers, aren't we? Like everybody wants to fix everything. So it's like, I'm so sorry, let's find a solution. Empathy says, I'm so sorry. And I'm going to sit here in it with you for as long as it takes. And that's it. And we have to get good at holding that space, allowing someone to just go through what they're feeling and not have to rush to fix it, right? We're trying to rush to the end of it instead of just saying, hey, we're in it right now. And it's okay to be in it. And I'm going to be in it with you. I mean, the power of that is immense. And when you give that gift to another human being, it's the greatest gift you can give. And as a leader, when you know how to hold space like that in the room, I mean, nothing caps that. I'm telling you, nothing. And I've watched it. I've watched leaders who learned how to do this effectively move their teams without even having to do anything. Just, being able to be present and to allow that space to exist, that silence that nobody loves, right? Everybody, we got to fill the silence. Why? Why do we have to do that? We don't have to do that. It's not about us. So being able to just sit in that space, I think that is real empathy. And again, when leaders know how to do that and can harness that power, It's magic, really, on a team. It's amazing to watch what happens.
I love the distinction that you draw between sympathy and empathy and just how different those two things are. Why do you think some leaders struggle with balancing empathy? I'm gonna hear you out. I'm gonna hear you out. I'm gonna be here for you, and I'm gonna sit with you in this for as long as it takes. We're not gonna try to rush the process, but all in the world of business, we can't just I can hear people already going, yeah, so you want us to just sit around and sing Kumbaya and hold hands.
Exactly.
And that's not what we're looking for. That doesn't really do much for the bottom line. And so leaders, could struggle with how do you balance empathy, which is definitely something we need for humans to be at their best with accountability.
No, that's a great
question. Got to get things done with excellence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the question I hear most often when people, when I talk about this, people are like, yeah, that's great. And what's the boundary of that? How do I make sure that my team is still getting things done? And I say, see what you just said. It's in what you just said. How do I make sure that my team, right? It's like, how do you make sure? Well, your behaviors are what's going to make sure. And so I think one of the biggest fears that leaders have is that they're going to lean too far into empathy, right? They'll lose their ability to hold people accountable. But here's the truth in that. Empathy and accountability are not opposites. They're actually on the same side. They're partners. And I think leaders struggle when they think accountability means being tough and empathy means being soft. That's not the truth. Real accountability isn't about control. It's about clarity. And real empathy isn't about lowering expectations. It's about understanding what people need to meet them. So balancing both means holding space for emotions while setting clear expectations, acknowledging struggles without excusing a lack of effort, leading with heart while also holding people to a high standard. Because the best leaders don't choose between the two. They know that the most accountable teams are built on a foundation of trust, and trust is also built through empathy, just like we talked about in our last segment with vulnerability. And so, I think there's little things that you can do in that in order to kind of build that muscle. One is listening to understand, not to just respond, right? That's a key piece that we always talk about with leadership. We have to be good listeners, but in an effective way. And then recognizing that everyone's experience is valid, even if it's different from our own, right? And again, we're going back to creating that space where people feel seen, they feel safe, they feel valued, and really being present in those moments for your team is also a part of empathy. It's like, it's one thing to just kind of, I hear it, but I'm off over here trying to do the next thing instead of just pausing for a minute and being in that present place and allowing that to take place and to listen, But I think that, you don't choose between empathy and accountability. I think you have to pair them and do that effectively.
Yeah. And that's powerful. I mean, I can really see how showing up this way as a leader can help you get the most out of your team. But one of the things you were saying is you sort of double clicked on the phrase, make sure. How do I make sure? And that is in the behaviors.
Yep.
Your consistent behavior and the way that you show up, your presence as a leader. And I was just thinking back to our discussion about uncertainty. And, when we have uncertainty swirling around us, whether it's the stuff that's going on in the world, whether you're facing maybe you're facing a corporate merger, maybe you're facing some big new policy shift or a big major, technology change in your company, that's a lot of uncertainty, and that can, ruffle a lot of feathers and get people, in a place of, fear and concern and whatnot. But that's the opportunity for leaders to really show up strong in this way. So what are some some tactical ways that leaders can build empathy so that they can lead these strategic initiatives and get people through it successfully?
So, I think with like any skill, it gets stronger with intention, right? Empathy has to be something we practice, not just something we feel. So here are a couple ways that I think leaders can kind of build this in their daily practice. Ask deeper questions. Instead of how's the project going, try what's been most challenging for you lately. Give people a chance to kind of share something real, right? Instead of it's great or it's fine or, yes or no answers. But I think also we have to listen to learn. Too often, I think we listen just enough to respond, right? Instead, we should be practicing listening to understand, paying attention to what's being said and what's left unsaid. I think we can learn a lot there. And then this is a big one. Hold space, not solutions. Again, it's like we don't need to rush to fix it. Let's hold the space. Sometimes people don't need advice either. How many times, have you maybe seen that in your own life? Sometimes I don't need advice. I just want to be heard, right? So instead of jumping to that place of like, I got to fix it, maybe ask what would feel most supportive to you right now. I use this question all the time. It's so powerful to be able to just pause and ask someone, what would support look like right now from me? And then just be quiet and let them answer. Because truthfully, what would support look like right now? We don't ask that enough. We just assume we know what support looks like and we go do that. And that might be totally missing the mark, right? So, and I think that also feeds into another one, which is moving, which we talk about all the time, moving from judgment to curiosity. And I think, before reacting to a situation through judgment, we can pause and we can ask ourselves, what might this person be going through that I don't see? What might be going on for this person right now? Because we don't know. There are plenty of times and examples that I can think of when, you're sitting next to someone and you know them pretty well, and you're wondering like, why are they acting like this? But there's a judgment that happens. It's like, God, you're being a jerk today. Or like, something where you're like, wow, why are you acting like that? Why are you being like that? Instead of saying, gosh, I wonder what's going on for you today. And letting that be the first thought instead of a judgment or a negative. And I think when we can do that, when we're actually shifting into that curiosity space, then we're allowing people to be able to show up wherever they are, however they are. Because, not every day is the best day for each individual person that we come across, right? Some people maybe. But it's interesting, and I don't know if you do this. I know this is weird, but I'll be driving down the road and I make up like scenarios of like what's happening with that guy at the light and this woman walking down the street. I wonder where she's.
I do that.
Why am I not surprised? But and we'll do that even. We'll go out to dinner and sit there and like make up a whole story about like this family over there or these people over here. This is Sue and she just got a new job and they're out celebrating, whatever. But I think, again, it's that when we don't have answers, our brain rushes to fill in the spots, right? We are programmed that we have to know all the answers, right? That's just how we've grown up. I mean, you raise your hand, you're supposed to know the answer. And I think sometimes to a fault, because we grow up believing that we have to know all the answers when asked. And I think really understanding that this curiosity space is not knowing the answers, but asking the right questions. And I think that we can do that more effectively by practicing that. I think we have to practice that. But that can build that empathy muscle too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to an example. So one of my consultants was trying to reach the client and, they'd been working together very closely. Mm-hmm. And suddenly the client was unresponsive. And so she reached out. She's like, I think we have a problem. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong, and like all these imaginations of what could be going on. And I'm like, well,
Yep.
let me just reach out and ask some questions. And so my questions were like, hey, boss, this person is usually very responsive. I just want to check in and find out, are they okay? Because
Right.
this behavior is different from what we normally see. Could it maybe be a technical issue they're grappling with? Wondering if you could provide some insight for us as we try to move this thing forward. And, it totally diffused the situation because they were able to come back and go, oh, yeah, they lost their internet connection. And so they're, scrambling, trying to catch up. But it wasn't like, oh, they ghosted me.
Right.
But that can be where your brain goes first.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And I think about that all the time. Like, when I'm reaching out to people and if they don't respond, I'm like, well, maybe their inbox is just as flooded as mine.
Fine. Right. Exactly.
And it doesn't hurt to try and reach out again.
Yeah.
I know that, I'm always trying to get stuff done in the margins of very busy days, and I can't be alone in that, and so, and when we're driving down the road, I do make up, why is that person driving so crazy?
Right.
They drank a lot and they just need to get to the facilities.
That's right. That might have been me. I don't know. Yeah, that's great.
Anyway.
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you're talking about is really important, especially in the world of innovation. One of the challenges that I see quite often is a rush to fix. And I know you were talking about more personal matters, maybe, and like,
but either way,
trying to rush to fix the problem rather than listening. And actually, your question, that's going to go on one of my stickies I keep in front of me. What would feel most supportive to you right now? That's a gold question.
Yeah, it is.
But I think about how this also applies to technology initiatives.
For sure.
I often see very brilliant technical people rush to solution where if they could just pause, crank up the curiosity a little bit and dig a little more, they would actually discover that the presenting problem isn't always the right problem to solve. And so I see way too many teams wasting time, money, effort, and energy
for sure
solving the wrong problem.
The wrong problems. Yeah.
And really, to get past that, you've got to dial up the curiosity and the empathy.
And you have to ask the right questions. That's how you solve the wrong problems, right?
Yeah, well, and feel safe enough to keep asking. And that's where I think people give up and don't stick with it. One of my favorite stories about this was a company I was working with. And I remember it was a Friday. I believe it was a Friday. It was toward the end of the day. And they reached out, we need you to brainstorm with us right away. We need to hire a whole bunch of people because we're not getting the app flow that we need. And we want you to brainstorm with us how we can hire people quickly. And so I paused and just said, hey, will you give me permission to ask a lot of questions so that I can really understand what's going on, so we can make sure that, we're solving the right thing in the best possible way. And I started digging in with the old 5 whys, but, and I just, why? Because that can sound like an interrogation.
Right.
But, so tell me what's going on? What's causing this urgency? So finding out what's the context, what's driving this. And I started digging and digging and digging and digging through lots of questions. And ultimately, we found out that what was happening that was causing their app flow, their application flow to stop is actually there was one word on their website that was turning off their prospective customer.
That's wild.
They actually did not need to hire anybody. They needed to change one word on their website, and they did that. And then the app flow started up again.
Right.
Immediately.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so, just imagine how much time and money you can save as a business if you can get your team behaving this way instead of the knee-jerk solve the surface problem. You're actually enabling people with the skills to dig deeper below the surface and solve the right problems that are valuable to solve for your company. That's, not a soft skill.
No.
That's hardcore bottom line impacting superpowers.
Correct. Yeah. No, you nailed it there. Absolutely.
So one of the things that comes up often in business, all sorts of situations, whether it's with customers or you're trying to solve problems in new ways, often there's conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so how do empathetic leaders handle conflict differently?
So obviously conflict is a part of leadership, right? That's always going to be a thing. But I think, the way we handle conflict determines whether it builds trust or breaks it. So I think that's an important thing to really recognize, that there's a lot of power in how you handle that. I think, an empathetic leader approaches conflict with curiosity, as we're talking about, instead of making assumptions or judgments. And in that, I'm going to take that a step deeper. They don't just focus on what happened. They dig into the why, right? Like you were talking about those 5 whys. Why did it happen? So that, we can make sure that that doesn't happen again. So here are maybe some ways to think about this. Instead of, you didn't meet the deadline, what's going on? They might ask, I noticed the deadline was missed. Can you help me understand what happened? The words help me understand is completely different than what's going on, right? I mean, it just feels different, even just saying it. I'm like, instead of saying this isn't acceptable, you might say, let's talk about what got in the way and how we can move forward. Again, it's a collaborative approach instead of pointing a finger and, telling. It's really, let's do this together. Empathy doesn't mean avoiding tough conversations at all. It means leading them with respect, with care, and with genuine desire to find those solutions together. So, when you think about how you react when someone comes at you, people don't shut down when they feel seen, they step up. And I think that's critical in the way that we respond and the way that we approach a conflict. We have to think about it in terms of, how we feel when someone approaches a conflict with us, right? And it's fascinating to me. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't like confrontation. Well, confrontation and conflict are two totally different things, but they're meshed together sometimes. People kind of get them confused, maybe. Confronting a problem is just looking at it face to face. That's all that means. Confront is, face to face. And we need that. We need to be able to do that. What I think people are trying to say when they say, I don't like confrontation, is I don't like conflict. Well, who likes conflict, right? Like that's a normal feeling. I think if we can look at conflict, though, as something that happens, not who we are, that we messed up, or, this is something that makes me less of a, able human, right? Like all of a sudden I'm less than because of conflict. I think empathetic leaders in this space can really do good for their teams by, again, slowing it down, by pausing it and collaborating in the curiosity space. So, let's talk about what got in the way. Let's talk about how we can move forward. Can you help me understand what happened, right? Instead of the, you didn't do this or whatever. That just doesn't feel good. And, I think that's a normal response, but there are ways that we can practice that.
This is reminding me of what came out of your research about the importance of relational leadership.
Absolutely.
And the common thread that I'm picking up in all of these examples is there's a shift that needs to happen from transactional to relational.
That's it.
Shifting from, for instance, a transactional status update. Where are we at on the project?
Exactly.
To relational leadership.
That's right.
What are you struggling with?
Yeah.
How can we work through this together? That's a very different space.
Very different.
But it's also incredibly empowering for a team to get through these things where, when you think about navigating uncertainty, and I bring that up a lot because when you're doing innovation, whether it's, a process improvement or reimagining your business model, no matter where you are on the spectrum of innovation or the size of the innovation, you're always doing something new that you haven't done before. Yeah. And you cannot get to the other side of it without going through uncertainty.
Yes, that's right.
And this curiosity and co-discovery, building that strong relational approach is, I think, the only thing that can get you through the uncertainty to the other side where you have a breakthrough that can help you shape the future.
Oh, I love that. You just touched on something. I think, recognizing and understanding what this idea of relational leadership is, which was so fascinating when we were looking at the differences in leaders who really felt like they knew how to do that and did it well. And the fact that was only 19% of our respondents was really eye-opening. And so many were the opposite of that, in that constrained leader place of everything that we're talking about, that is the don't do it this way model. And that was our highest percentage of respondents. And, that tells a story. It tells a story of where we are and how we have viewed leadership and building businesses and, building future innovation. And it's told a story of that transactional command and control. This is what you do, go do it, instead of we, us, sitting in it with you, human approach of how we relate to other people, right? And I think the quest in life for most people is, how do I build the strongest, best relationships that work for me throughout my life? Whether it's at work, it's at home, it's socially, whatever it is, you see those people. Who are those people who people want to be around? They're the most authentic. They're the most genuine, right? They're the ones that care the most. Those are the people who attract people. That's just normal. So instead of looking for those people, we can practice trying to be those people. That's the answer.
Well, I was just thinking through scenarios, because I can just imagine some folks might be listening to this going, oh, it was such soft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just got to get stuff done, right. And yes, I'm thinking about, for instance, we talk a lot about the fire engine and that sort of thing, so there's a fire. Well, you probably need to fly into command and control type leadership. But your ability to do that with a team is built on a foundation of strong relational leadership.
That's right.
You trust, that your team, everybody's got your back. You're going to run to that burning building and you're going to follow the instructions of the leader because you've built that foundation before you even arrived at the fire. And I think that, there probably is some balancing even in this that has to happen, and that it's not one for the sake of the other.
Right.
But how do you become the best human by blending this, so that you can handle all of the different scenarios of life that come up as you're trying to build your business?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, I think it comes down to, what does it look like when I'm building a relationship? Because really everything I do in any given day is about building relationships. Think about it, right? Everything we do, we're either building a relationship or we're pulling it apart. That's pretty much how that we're either connecting or we're disconnecting. We're coming together to each other or we're going away from each other. And it's all of these, when you're thinking about how that works in collaboration with other human beings, people can do that really well. And then there's people who don't do that really well and just go by I have to get it done. I have to get it done. I have to get it done. I think what happens though in those moments, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about, you already built that foundation. Think about when I'm going to a fire, I know my job is to put out the fire. That's just the fact of the job. but that doesn't tell me how we relate to each other, right? I think that goes deeper into recognizing that I can show up at that fire, and because we've built this solid foundation, I know that you have my back. I know you have my back, and I know you because I can trust you. And we already have that. That relational net is built, right? So I have something to fall into.
Yeah.
And, think about it. If you didn't have that, I'm going and I'm assuming you're going to have my back because it's part of the job. But do I really know that? If we don't really communicate, I don't know you at all.
Yeah.
How does that work? How do I trust you if I don't know you, right? There's this disconnect, I think, that's natural when we don't build the relationship.
I think this is a really important thing. And I know, you and I have collaborated to help teams go through this brave human leadership experience before taking on a big transformational initiative. And I think that it really does build a strong foundation. I'm just thinking about, possibilities for the future, because I've seen so many transformational initiatives, some succeed wildly, some, we survived that.
Right.
And some are just dismal, dramatic failures that leave people traumatized.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. But I think that the thing is missing is from the start, building the team that is enabled to and empowered to take on the wicked, tricky situations that are inevitably going to come up when you are moving into something that you've never done before.
Right.
And back to expecting to know all the answers about everything. I think that's, the biggest challenge is realizing, what? We don't know all the things.
Right.
And we're well able to figure them out together if we can figure out how to work together effectively. And I think that that's where empathy really plays a huge role in succeeding, compressing timelines, and getting ROI out of these big investments that companies are making in transformational initiatives. But the thing that's often left to the side is the importance of building the people to be able to take those things on.
That's right.
I think there's just a lot of, misconceptions about empathy and about these things that we need to bust.
Yeah, no, you're right. Absolutely. There's a lot. I think, one of the biggest, I would call it a myth maybe about empathy, is that it makes leaders too soft, right? I want to go there for a second because you touched on that. The truth is, I think empathy makes leaders stronger. And I think I've seen it now. I've seen the difference, and it's like, oh yeah, no, you're way stronger when you're holding that space for someone. Empathy doesn't mean letting emotions take over. It means understanding emotions so that we can lead through them. It means making decisions with both logic and heart. What does that look like? Well, as we talk about, emotional intelligence, right? These are buzzwords that I've heard for years, but they're real, right? I think people kind of don't understand that for really what it is. I think understanding emotional intelligence is understanding my own ability to control my emotions and the awareness of the emotions of other people around me. And those two things have to exist, which is the key to this empathy piece. I think it also is recognizing that leadership isn't just about results, right? We talk about that, it's results-driven people. You might get the numbers you need, but at what cost? And this is the question I've asked so many, we were working with a huge tech company who was very results-driven. It was results, give me the numbers, give me the numbers, give me the numbers. And I literally asked that question. I said, and at what cost? And they just were silent. And it was during that period of time a couple of years ago where you're watching people leave companies in droves, right? It was like, we're done with this. We got to find a way out. And people started to do that. Yeah. And I said, so here's the cost. Your people don't want to work for you. What are you going to do about it? You can't be a, top 5 global company if all of your people are leaving. What are you going to do? was interesting because it was kind of like, well, this is how we've always done it. Okay, great. And that doesn't make it right. Just because you've always done it that way and you've gotten by because people were too afraid to leave. Now people aren't afraid to leave. People are saying, wait a minute, what am I doing? I don't want to spend my whole life in a space that doesn't respect or care about me. Right. So I think there's, it's not just about results, it's about people. And, when people feel seen and they feel listened to and they feel understood, they're going to perform at their best. That's proven. This is not, pie in the sky. This is researched and proven. When we lead with empathy, we don't just build better teams, we build better humans. And that's what we want at the end of the day. If you have any bone in your body that cares about people, this matters to you, and it should matter. Because I think, nothing happens without your people. I always say, a company's greatest asset is always going to be their people, always. No matter what else comes along, we're always going to need that connection. That's how we're wired.
That's powerful stuff. So, Jen, just as we close this out, for leaders who really want to develop this, who want to be more empathetic, what is one mindset shift that they could start practicing today, right now, to show up in a different way?
I think the greatest mover of empathy and that thing that you can start doing right now is practicing the idea of replacing judgment with curiosity. When someone's struggling, instead of thinking, why aren't they getting it together? Like, what is happening? Maybe start with yourself and try asking, what might they be carrying right now that I don't see? Because you probably don't see it. And most people are really good at hiding stuff, right? And so that one simple shift, when something pops up that you find yourself doing this quick judgment or assumption, stop, see it, recognize it. Don't beat yourself up over it, but say, there it is. Okay, I'm doing that thing. I'm judging. And take a breath and then reframe that into a curiosity statement, a question that you're asking for yourself. This is my reminder. My reminder is, what might they be carrying right now that I don't see? Because when we stop assuming and we start asking, even personally, even first, before we ask outwardly, we create that space for connection. And connection, that's where real leadership lives. That's the only space that it should live.
I love that. And that those are such practical things that we can implement right away. Jen, thank you so much for sharing your insights on brave human leadership. And thank you for this wonderful series. It's just been such a fun journey, and it's always so phenomenal when we get to collaborate and, make impact for our clients.
If I can say one thing, I want to thank you, because you are asking those questions. You are pushing that envelope. You're pushing boundaries. You're inviting people to think beyond where they are now. And I've learned so much from just listening to you and your thought process. So thank you for leading that charge and for bringing me along for the ride. It's been a fun conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. For our listeners, what resonated for you? What is one thing that you can take away from this conversation that you could apply to change your day-to-day? Let's keep the conversation going. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can visit tomorrowzone.io. You can explore Jen's work at the Human Leadership Institute. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, share it with a colleague, practice the things that you're taking away from this. And until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.